Hi, Joe Smiles here, Uncensored Natty Pro. I help overweight and obese people lose fat permanently. I'm also a rehab and strength conditioning specialist and work with a renowned orthopedic surgeon who has the Tendon Pain Clinic on Harley Street in London, UK. This is part 3 of 3 parts called How Your Brain and Fat Cells Make You Fatter or Slimmer. In part 1, I talked about one of 2 fat cells, namely leptin, and how it affects your brain. In part 2, I talked about how leptin affects parts of your brain and your mind that control your appetite, behaviour and cognition. I explained how a dysregulated hypothalamus and a dysregulated prefrontal cortex caused by your fat cells affect the way that you think and behave. In this part 3, I'll talk about the second fat hormone, adiponectin, and how it affects your brain and your endocrine system. These 3 parts will all help you to realize how your brain and your mind and your fat cells either make you lose weight or gain weight. And this is why when you're overweight or obese or have fat to lose, you must override your body fat, which is influencing your psychology, and develop new mindset and psychological techniques to achieve permanent lifelong fat loss. Hormones released from adipose tissue number 2, so adiponectin. This brings us to the second hormone, adiponectin, which I'm going to talk about, which is released from your fat cells that influences your brain and your ability to function on a higher level. Adiponectin released from your fat cells regulates glucose and fatty acid breakdown, which is actually a good thing. So leptin causes negative consequences to your hypothalamus by causing it to become dysregulated from too much leptin, but adiponectin has an anti-inflammatory properties which help to regulate your hypothalamus. In obesity, there's often an overproduction of leptin due to increased fat mass. However, the hypothalamus can become resistant to leptin's signals, leading to leptin resistance. When this happens, despite high levels of leptin, your hypothalamus fails to regulate appetite and energy expenditure, and this contributes to further fat gain and metabolic dysregulation. The dysregulation of leptin signaling in the hypothalamus due to leptin resistance is associated with chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and impaired neural function. This exacerbates problems like obesity, insulin resistance, and metabolic syndrome. However, adiponectin is another hormone produced by your fat cells, but unlike leptin, it's typically found in lower levels in obese people. So adiponectin has an anti-inflammatory and insulin sensitizing properties. Adiponectin helps reduce inflammation by preventing pro-inflammatory cytokines and promoting the production of anti-inflammatory cytokines. This can have a protective effect on the hypothalamus by reducing inflammation and helping to maintain its normal regulatory functions. Adiponectin helps the hypothalamus become better at regulating energy balance, appetite, and metabolic processes by reducing inflammation and improving insulin sensitivity. So higher levels of adiponectin are associated with better metabolic health and a lower risk of conditions such as type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Losing fat can lead to an increase in adiponectin levels in your bloodstream, which can encourage an anti-inflammatory response and help protect your hypothalamus. When you lose fat, particularly visceral fat, so the fat around your organs and tummy, adiponectin levels tend to increase. Adiponectin's anti-inflammatory response. Okay, so adiponectin has potent anti-inflammatory properties. It works by inhibiting the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6 and promotes the production of anti-inflammatory cytokines. Adiponectin activates the AMP activated protein kinase, or AMPK for short, that pathway which plays a key role in cellular energy regulation. When AMPK is activated, it inhibits the nuclear factor kappa B, signaling pathway, which is responsible for the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6. This leads to a decrease in the levels of inflammatory cytokines. Adiponectin also directly suppresses NF-κB, which is a protein that controls the transcription of DNA and plays a central role in inflammation. By inhibiting NF-κB, adiponectin reduces production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Also, adiponectin activates peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, or PPARY for short, which is a nuclear receptor that regulates gene expression involved in glucose and lipid metabolism. So PPARY activation is known to increase the production of anti-inflammatory cytokines and reduce inflammation in your tissues. Through adiponectin's interaction with PPARY and AMPK signaling pathways, it also enhances the production of interleukin 10, which is a cytokine with strong anti-inflammatory effects. Interleukin 10 works by inhibiting the activity of pro-inflammatory cytokines and suppressing inflammatory responses. This reduction in inflammation is beneficial for overall metabolic health and can help protect various organs, including the hypothalamus. Adiponectin's protection abilities for your hypothalamus. Okay, so as I've discussed, your hypothalamus plays a crucial role in regulating appetite, energy balance, and metabolism. So chronic inflammation associated with obesity impairs hypothalamic function. This leads to issues like leptin resistance and disrupted energy regulation. However, increased adiponectin levels from exercise and fat loss reduces this inflammation, thereby improving your hypothalamus's ability to function properly and regulate metabolic processes effectively. Adiponectin's ability to improve insulin sensitivity. Okay, so higher levels of adiponectin in your blood are generally associated with improved insulin sensitivity and a lower risk of inflammation. So, adiponectin plays a protective role against atherosclerosis and insulin resistance. Adiponectin is anti-atherogenic or anti-atherosclerotic, and it helps with insulin sensitivity. So insulin is the main hormone responsible for regulating the uptake of glucose, amino acids and fatty acids into cells. Adiponectin enhances insulin's ability to perform this function in the following 4 ways. Number 1, adiponectin enhances insulin's ability to uptake glucose, amino acids and fatty acids into the muscles ready to be burned. Number 2, adiponectin signals to your liver to decrease gluconeogenesis, which is the process of creating new glucose from non-carbohydrate sources, thus preventing excessive blood glucose spikes. Number 3, adiponectin promotes the breakdown of fatty acids for energy production within your muscle cells. And number 4, adiponectin supports the health and function of the beta cells in your pancreas, which are responsible for producing insulin. Adiponectin improves insulin sensitivity in muscle and fat cells, allowing them to take up more glucose effectively. This reduces the need for the pancreas to produce excessive insulin, preventing insulin resistance. That's why it's so important to lose fat cells in order to put diabetes into remission. Getting diabetes or putting it into remission has nothing to do with eating sugar or carbs and everything to do with increasing or decreasing your fat cells. However, if you do have diabetes, you don't need to avoid carbs or sugar. You need to reduce your adipocytes so that you can release more adiponectin into your bloodstream to help reduce your inflammation and help insulin to uptake glucose and take it to your muscle cells to be utilized by adenosine triphosphate. Let me explain this a little further. So how does adiponectin increase efficiency of insulin and glucose. So after you eat, your blood glucose levels rise, and if you have diabetes, it can rise above normal glucose range. In response, your pancreas releases insulin from beta cells into the bloodstream. Insulin then binds to receptors on the surface of muscle cells. This binding triggers a series of reactions inside the cell that result in the insertion of glucose transporters, specifically GLUT4, into the cell membrane. The GLUT4 transporters then allow glucose to enter the muscle cell from the bloodstream. Once inside the muscle cell, glucose undergoes something called glycolysis, which is a metabolic pathway that breaks down glucose to produce adenosine triphosphate. GLUT4 stands for glucose transporter type 4. It's a type of glucose transporter protein that's found primarily in muscle cells and adipocytes of fat cells, and GLUT4 facilitates the movement of glucose across the plasma membrane of cells. GLUT4's main function is to transport glucose from the bloodstream into the cells, where it can be used for energy production or stored later for use. So GLUT4 is unique among glucose transporters because its activity is insulin dependent. This means that its ability to transport glucose into cells is regulated by the hormone insulin. So when you eat a meal that contains carbohydrates, your blood glucose levels rise. In response, the pancreas releases insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin doesn't directly bind to glucose. Instead, insulin binds to insulin receptors on the surface of muscle and fat cells, and this binding triggers a series of reactions inside the cell, result in the insertion of glucose transporters, specifically GLUT4, into the cell membrane. These transporters then allow glucose to enter the cells, where it can be then used for energy. After insulin binds to its receptor, the GLUT4 transporters help move glucose from the bloodstream into the cells, where it's used for energy or stored for energy. And once inside the cell membrane, GLUT4 transporters allow glucose to enter the cell by facilitating its passage through the plasma membrane. Once inside the cell, glucose can be used for 1. Immediate energy production via glycolysis and the citric acid cycle. 2. Stored as glycogen in muscle cells, or 3, converted to fat in adipocytes. So proper functioning of GLUT4 is vital for metabolic health. Impairments in GLUT4 translocation or function can contribute to insulin resistance, a type of hallmark of type 2 diabetes and other metabolic disorders. Exercise can also stimulate the translocation of GLUT4 into the cell membrane, independent of insulin. This is the one reason why physical activity is beneficial for improving insulin sensitivity and glucose regulation. Okay, so adiponectin increases the sensitivity of insulin receptors on muscle cells. So when adiponectin levels are high, insulin receptors respond more effectively to insulin. This means that even with low levels of insulin, the muscle cells can still effectively and efficiently take up glucose. Adiponectin plays a role in increasing the efficiency of GLUT4 transporters, particularly in your muscle cells. So here's how it works. Adiponectin activates an enzyme called AMP activated protein kinase, or AMPK for short, in muscle cells. AMPK plays a critical role in cellular energy balance and enhances insulin signaling pathways. This activation helps improve effectiveness of insulin in stimulating uptake of glucose. Therefore, adiponectin helps reduce diabetes and insulin resistance, thus reducing inflammation and stopping hypothalamus and prefrontal cortex dysregulation. Therefore, it helps you think and behave better. When AMPK is activated, it enhances the translocation of GLUT4 transporters to the cell membrane of muscle cells. By promoting the movement of GLUT4 transporters to cell membranes, Adiponectin helps to increase the uptake of glucose from the bloodstream into the cells. This process is essential for maintaining normal blood glucose levels and improving glucose sensitivity. Adiponectin increases the expression of GLUT4 transporters in muscle cells. Therefore, more GLUT4 transporters means more glucose can get taken up from the bloodstream into the muscle cells. Adiponectin's ability to reduce atherosclerosis. Okay, so adiponectin has anti-inflammatory properties which reduces the inflammatory processes in your blood vessel walls, which reduces the plaque buildup formation and atherosclerosis. So adiponectin also improves endothelial function. The endothelium are the cells that line the walls of your arteries, veins and blood vessels. Adiponectin helps your blood vessel elasticity and reduces the risk of blood clots, which are both important factors in preventing atherosclerosis. Adiponectin also regulates cholesterol by reducing the formation of foam cells, which build up during the development of blocked arteries. So foam cells are monocytes and macrophages from your immune system that become dysfunctional when they encounter excessive amounts of low density lipoprotein cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. And the LDL cholesterol builds up in the endothelial cells, the cells that make up the lining of your arteries. So these dysfunctional monocytes and macrophages create foamy fat deposits, and they build up in your artery wall, causing plaque buildup. The drawback to being fat in terms of adiponectin. However, the kicker with adiponectin is that when it's low, you get a higher increase in insulin resistance, atherosclerosis, impaired endothelial cells, and impaired hypothalamus and prefrontal cortex. The drawback is that in overweight and obese people, there's lower circulating levels of adiponectin. However, in leaner people, there's higher circulating levels of adiponectin. The reason being is that fatter people have more visceral fat around their organs and abdomen, which is poor at releasing adiponectin compared to having subcutaneous fat, which is better at releasing adiponectin. Leaner people have more subcutaneous fat, so this is the fat just below the skin, and much less visceral fat, and therefore they have more circulating adiponectin than fatter people. Higher visceral fat and thus lower adiponectin contributes to increased risk of atherosclerosis and insulin resistance in fatter people. Also, the fatter you are, the more systemic inflammation you have, and therefore the more dysfunction your brain becomes, which leads to a more dysfunctional mind. All this impairs adipose tissue's ability to produce adiponectin. But again, don't take my word for it. Let's look at a few studies here. So the first study we have, number 3 in the list, 2010, which also explains that adiponectin alters and improves glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity, exhibits anti-inflammatory and atherogenic properties, so reduces atherosclerosis and low density lipoprotein cholesterol, plaque and foam cell buildup. Also, the study explains that increased adiponectin circulation is determined primarily by genetic factors, nutrition, exercise and abdominal adiposity. So adiponectin concentrations are lower in overweight and obese people, and also lower in people who have metabolic syndrome, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, but higher in leaner people. Okay, let's look at study number 4, 2020. It explains that adiponectin is well known for its homeostasis of regulating glucose levels, lipid metabolism, and insulin sensitivity through its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects. All these metabolic processes are mediated via 2 adiponectin receptors called AdipoR1 and AdipoR2. Also, this paper states that weight loss or caloric restriction leads to increasing adiponectin levels, which is associated with increased insulin sensitivity. Therefore, adiponectin plays a crucial role in treating type 2 diabetes and other obesity-related diseases affecting insulin resistance like cancer, or cardiovascular disease. Okay, summary. So to summarize what I've said, this summarizes why the quick fixes, the fad diets and these 3-month weight loss challenges don't work. You've got to understand the pathophysiology of fat gain on the brain and on your mind so that you can develop and implement strategies to override the physiology and psychology that fat gain causes over time. Chronic inflammation from fat stores can lead to cognitive impairments by affecting your hypothalamus, your hippocampus, and your prefrontal cortex of your brain. This all results in difficulties with memory, attention, impulse control, planning, emotional regulation, and problem solving. All these skills and abilities are needed for sustained fat loss and must be learned through psychological, mindset, and lifestyle techniques. This is what I focus on in my Fat Loss S.O.S mentoring course. These brain impairments can significantly impact your daily life and your health, making it harder to function effectively in both personal and professional contexts. Leptin can cause negative consequences in your hypothalamus and prefrontal cortex when present in excessive amounts due to obesity, leading to leptin resistance and hypothalamic dysregulation. Adiponectin, on the other hand, has anti-inflammatory properties that help to regulate and protect your hypothalamus and prefrontal cortex, promoting better cognition, better metabolic health, and reducing the risk of obesity-related complications. If you're interested in any of this, in how your mind and your brain play the biggest role in lifelong fat loss, you may want to buy my 2 ebooks that I'm currently writing. Everything you need to know about your mind and your brain regarding permanent fat loss, and everything you need to know about nutrition and permanent fat loss. I'm currently writing them, so if you're interested, you can DM me and send me an email, and I can let you know ASAP when I finished writing them and when I'm going to sell them. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel for more evidence-based, science-based content. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and leave any comments and questions below that you have. I'll answer all your questions. Also, why not book in a free video call with me regarding my fat loss course, or you can also subscribe to my blog for more evidence-based articles at fatlossos.com. Thanks for watching and have a great day.